Story 1. Just another dead girl underwater. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds, 18 hours since the police declared me missing, 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before, careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle ... Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch black, lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began, and the first article published by a local newspaper reads, "Promising high school student missing after night swim in lake." Shortly after, the Water Rescue Service and Fire Brigade take over the SE Arch. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing. Through the damp earth, a human chain forms. People moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers off, overhead, its whirring blade slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight, yet the woods remain silent. The police began to ask cool questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry, sad, suicidal? No, and no. She was singing, she was dancing, she seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stay behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason, or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow, and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and, looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance. But I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course, she would say that. What else would the girls argue about if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly, Cindy, Carrie, something with a C though, right? So when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of T.E. investigation, she jumps at it. And fortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes. But no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold, white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walked this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl, the one who got scared at every creak in the dark, the one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. So I stood up and said I'd walk alone, instead of sticking to the dark trail, though I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank, a bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent, but when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher, Dev, and one of my classmates reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her before the trip had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service. And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party and that they went to the boathouse where, according to her, nothing happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, the suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually people began to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course, unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up, unsatisfying for the police, left with wire, yet another unsolved case on their desk, unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little G. IRL ... Maybe one day a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast. Or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in, enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching. Or maybe none of this happens, and I'll fade away like countless other women who are silenced every day simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the two men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end I am just another dead girl underwater. Story 2. Feral, I taught her to lie before she could spell her name, told her people were soft, stupid, and always looking for a story that made them feel good about parting with money. Back then, our narrative was the plain truth, an amputee raising his kid on his own. Before long, we noticed how different people responded to different aspects of our lives. Our narrative he then developed into a collection of short stories we kept at the ready. I curated those tales, and she delivered them with big eyes and borrowed grief. We weren't thieves, not in our minds, just realists cashing in on a world that stopped caring about people like us long ago. Only a fool would put his hope in the compassion of strangers. It's us or them, and it sure as hell ain't gonna be us. Back then, she just nodded. Lately, she doesn't wait for me to speak. We're in some town, I don't even remember the name. We never stay long, too many faces recognize you, too many stories get recycled, so we move on. June picks the marks now, and I don't stop her. Not because I agree with her choices, but because she makes them with precision. And it used to be me. I'd scan the crowds the way I once scanned rooftops, looking for tells, shaky hands, unfocused gaze, someone seemingly neglected. June was the hook, a girl with a welfare rock 3S, eyes is too big for her, tremble in her voice, maybe a fake bruise under the cheekbone when we needed it. The guy with the cardigan at the boardwalk, she says, peeling an orange, why him? Thinks the world still owes him something. What's the story? She shrugs, something tragic. I'll improvise. There was a time I polished the lies, refined them, cleaned them up. Now, June writes her own scripts better than I ever did. She always admired me, even if I couldn't look at her without remembering the woman she took from me. By now, she learned everything I taught her and started adding her own. It wasn't a game to her. It was art, a show, every victim a new stage. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being for money. It was for me. June wanted me to be proud, and I was. Her cons get sharper each time. One afternoon, she comes home from a run, smiling like she just won a medal. You should have seen him, she says, tossing some bills on the counter like a trophy, tears down his face. Thought I was his niece from Pittsburgh. I hear her talking to herself at night, practicing voices, some little girl sweet, some hollow and broken, something she figured out on her own along the way. One morning I hear her sing in a low, breathy voice, Nana, please remember why name I still sleep holding your frame. It's too good, too cruel, you scare me sometimes. She grins like it's a compliment. Another time we drive by a care home. Let me try something, she says, grabbing my arm. Says she finds someone lonely, someone slow. I stay in the car, engine idling, fingers tightening on the wheel. June walks in with her scarf tied like a schoolgirl. Esbo, she finds a guy in a chair by the fish tank. Gray sweater, lost eyes. She kneels at his side. I can see her mouthing Grandpa. His head lifts, confused, hopeful. She nods. Her voice breaks. His hands tremble. She takes them. They talk. He weeps, laughs, takes off his ring and presses it into her hand. June kisses his forehead and walks out like she was born from the Silence Inn. That room back in the car. She rolls the ring across, her palm solid gold, she says, looking at it. Can you believe it? Sometimes I feel like I could tell them anything, and they'd buy it. She laughs low and self-satisfied, and there it is, a strange mix of pride and rot in my chest. I want to be proud, and I used to be, until now. She reminds me of all the young, hot-headed boots back in the day. They'd discard the leash by week 2, drunk on power and the silence of command, barely dry and determined to go out wilding in the village, eager to do something, everything, anything of order, structure, and rules. And then there were others, the ones who'd gone feral, lacking any morals or remorse, not looking at you or even through you, just profiling and scanning for weakness. Back then, I hated those types, the ones who stopped pretending they were human and wore it like a badge. You enjoyed it, I ask, the moment I mean. Yeah, she says, turning her head, of course. That night I can't sleep. I watch the ceiling and think of the way her face lit up. How natural it all looked. She didn't just lie. She fed on it. Not just the money, but the ease of manipulation, the victory. I tell her we're leaving. No more cons for a while. June doesn't protest. Thankfully, doesn't even ask why. We drive west, through small towns where most have little, and those who do keep it close. We sleep in the car for 3 nights, and I don't speak a word. The silence stretches between us like no man's land, neither of us willing to cross it. On the 4th, she asks if we're going somewhere in particular. No, I say. We end up in a town by the sea, cheap motels, at her beaten storefronts, off-season quiet, a place seemingly forgotten by the world. We check in under new names, and I tell her we'll find work. Something honest this time. June just rolls her eyes. I take a job helping around the dock, and she disappears most days. I don't ask. One night she comes back late, knuckles scabbed. June doesn't say anything. I don't push. Later, I find her sitting in the bathroom, the door half open, staring at her reflection. You hate me now, don't you? She asks. No. Then, after a beat, almost without meaning to, I add, you did nothing wrong. June doesn't say a word, just closes the door, and I stand there, stunned at the lie I had said like I believed it. I don't sleep. On the edge of the bed, I ponder how many times I reassure myself it was all for her, to feed her, clothe her, to keep her safe, but it was always for me, for my anger, my loss. And she took it all in, let it fill her, because she wanted me to see her, and I never did, never could, not the child nor the student, not even the echo of the woman I lost. Now, for the first time, I see not just the damage in her, but the void, the space I carved, out, piece by piece, and filled with my bile. She isn't me. She's worse. I told myself I had reasons, grief, betrayal, bills, pain. But her reason, me, that Night I back, I leave her only hand the keys to the car, considering a note, no words come to mind, so I just walk away, not because I don't love her, but because I finally do. Story 3, Petrified. You would never have noticed it if you weren't looking for it. That was precisely the point. The instructions given in my embroidery group had been clear enough. After nightfall, take a stroll on the second lane past the bakery, look for the unlit lamppost, and turn down that dark alley. They said in hushed voices as the pianist began playing in sudden loud fervor, by coincidence. Then you will see a mossy stone staircase which you will descend, and at the end of it there is a dim hallway. She lives through the set of green doors on the left. The doors are tall and French like my husband's mistress, but peeling and weathered. I can tell they were once painted a lovely shade of emerald green. Half of that green paint lies in small piles of flakes on the cobblestone. I debate knocking and decide instead to reach with Hal's confidence for the rusted copper handle. It turns downward easily. A small bell rings and echoes, "Welcome." On the poster she is grotesque, an example of how time and sentimentality are in a person sour, but in person she has the kind of enduring beauty you can't tear your eyes away from. Do come in, darling. Don't be shy. Contrary to popular belief, I don't bite, although I can't say nothing here does. Her voice is like a wind chime, melodic and resonating, barely brushing over the crashing waves of her words. I wonder if I'm here too long, if that voice will drag me out to deep sea, or did that only work on men in the myths? Take a seat, love. Yes, there is perfect. Would you like a cup of tea? Well, it's never too late for tea, is it now? I enjoy tea late into the night myself, but maybe you've been raised more proper than that. Here the cup is warm, not hot. If she noticed my shaking hands when reaching for it, she didn't say a word. It takes more than a few seconds for my eyes to adjust to the warmly lit room after a dark and shadowy street. Among her many talents, it cannot be said that she was a good decorator. The shabby boards of tea walls are empty, but for an assortment of faded newspaper clippings from the highlights of her anonymous career, obituaries mostly. A tattered blue curtain with tassels hangs behind the armchair she's perk head in, dividing off part of the room. Eccentrically painted shelves house arrays of books and bottles of objects my gaze prefers not to settle on. She would have been called a witch for her collections had she not already acquired numerous more colorful nicknames by the public. The only item of some value is worn loosely around her slender wrist, a heavy and ornate gold watch, the kind of thing that would make a petty thief's day to see glinting underneath a man's sleeve in the street. She catches me admiring it and smiles thinly, holding up her arm up to eye level. Isn't it a beauty? It was my first husband's, this watch. On the 10th anniversary of his death, I'm going to smash it to bits and melt the gold into a necklace for myself. I deserve a little gift from him, I think. Her laugh unnerves me, but I find myself too curious to be afraid. I politely say my condolences for her husband's death. Oh, darling, don't be sorry, T. That man is dead. The one good thing he did was to be the inspiration for the charity work I do. I haven't always done this. I used to be an actress, a leading lady of the stage. Men would come from all over the city to see my shows, for I was beautiful then. Sometimes after the shows they would approach me, usually blind drunk, complimenting my dress or what was underneath it, asking for a kiss or a drink or a night. And sometimes they didn't ask. My husband became my husband not because he asked, but because he damaged me, and he was rich enough to get away with it and clever enough to know that marriage was my only option. She smooths down the skirt of her maroon dress, then looks up at me with a solemn expression I can't fully read. It isn't hard to believe she was once a sought-after woman, though sunken in age. Her cheeks are smooth, and her face looks as though it was hand-carved out of porcelain by God. Her hair is twisted into a dark crown atop her head, secured with metallic pins. Her eyes are like a cat's, but not a house cat. No, definitely not. Like those of a tiger that has been left to go hungry for far too long. I will her to continue talking and not look at me with those eyes again. We sip our tea in unison, upholding our masquerade as ladies. She takes in a breath. He said he loved me, and at the beginning I believed it. He may have loved me. He certainly desired me. I think mostly he loved seeing the desire and jealousy of other men when he told them I was his wife. But that got old fast. So did I in his eyes when it had been a year, and I still had not given him a child. I turned ugly to him, and he acted ugly accordingly. One night he came home from the pub talking about how the other men's wives had filled their houses with children by now. He spoke of babies like cattle. Then he threatened that he ought to tell the whole town that I was secretly a whore and Ave me, I should have kept quiet and obeyed and smothered him in his sleep like a good wife. Instead, I promised him that as long as I was alive I would never let a child be born cursed enough to have him as a father. I'm sure you know what happens next, or otherwise you wouldn't be here, my darling. She traces a scar on her chin that I hadn't noticed before, he extending along her jaw to the start of the delicate bones of her neck. I imagine it snaking around the rest of her throat in a ring, strangling her pale skin, and my breath catches. It looks as if lightning struck her. She was struck, though not by something as rare as lightning. I instinctively touch my collarbone where I know without looking there's a ghastly bruise. My modest neckline covers it, but somehow it feels like she knows it's there, my mark of pain. I hope it goes away quickly so my husband does not think me unsightly. But then again, perhaps that will not be necessary. I nod at her, meekly to show that I do know what happens next. I can't say whether he truly meant to kill me, but to hurt me, to wound me, to make my thoughts and words disappear in flames. He me at that with all his heart. The funny thing is it was him who made my words true. Of course, he couldn't have known that I was with child. Even I did not know then. After, no one would ever get to. No, I made a gravestone, although there was nothing to bury, and then a month later I buried my poor sick husband next to it, marked only with a slab that did not bear his name. Wealthy and beloved as his gold and his life, in death he became only stone. The disease had taken him so quickly that there was no time for anyone to save him. Shame on chance to take him from this world so young, got him like poison, essentially. The porcelain around her eyes cracks faintly in amusement. I have nothing to say in response. My mind stuck on the picture of a crude gravestone smaller than it should be. Nah, love, how would you like your tragedy to occur? The widows in my town all chose differently. Most agree that the worst methods are only to be said for the worst husbands, but sometimes there is no rhyme or reason to it. After all, all's fair in love and war. Millions of second and third and fourth thoughts crossed my mind on the way here, but now those voices are silent and there is only mine, and hers, and the input of the hissing wind outside. Well, what will it be? In 2 weeks it will happen. On the way home after a day of work, my husband will feel a bout of hopelessness that gives him a nudge to hurl himself off of the local bridge. The river below is not a kind one, especially to those who never learned to swim. He will have been drunk, since he often is, and everyone knows how he gets when he's drunk. No one will discuss a death as taboo as taking your own life. My children and I will cry and wear CK for weeks, though no longer than what is expected. At the same time, the black of our bruises will fade. He won't be missed very much, really. Perhaps that French woman will miss him, but she would have met the man that I knew soon enough. I will decide to raise my children in the countryside alone, and we will be happy. I cannot say yet whether I will regret it. The final time I will see the woman's wild tiger's eyes, she will tell me that not once has she regretted anything in her life. She will say that it was a pleasure to do it. And fearfully I will leave her. Oh, it really is getting late, love. Your family must be at home expecting you. I reply that they are, and I thank her for her kindness, nervously reaching to shake her hand. How much blood has coated it. On the posters they say she has killed 3 men. But I know these were simply the time she wanted it enough to make it gruesome. The posters also envision her as grotesque, which means that they have not ever seen her, or the mark on her jaw from her fall after being struck by lightning. The posters know nothing. The men know nothing. We women must stick together. Yes, the image of my young daughter appears and consumes my mind. I would do everything in my power to ensure she never has to know the instructions to get here. There will be no scars for my girl to trace. I will make sure of that. I nod and drop the woman's unassuming porcelain hand. Beneath the sound of her wind chime voice is as soft to know as I hadn't paid attention to before, almost like a breeze rustling through dying trees, overlaid with the humming of the earth. It is separate from the wind and the rushing of my blood. She notices my piqued interest, and her then say anything, stands, chuckles, and regally draws back the tattered blue curtain behind her. In view now is a cage filled with twisting and writhing scaled bodies, hissing and operating with each other for air. They move as one, a trembling monster of green. I step back in sudden horror. She isn't looking at me, but I see her eyes flash ravenously. You don't have to worry about them, darling. Their venom is reserved for the venomous story for trial by egotism. The Honorable Judge Harold Brybar strode to the bench bearing a coarse smile. The court knew that smile well, as did millions watching on view screens all over Mars, as did tens of millions back on Earth who wouldn't get the feed for another hour or so. They also knew the arch of his thick gray eyebrows, the well-trimmed salt-tanned pepper hair he'd gracefully let recede, the petite spectacles he wore when reading, and the mild way he cleared his throat to bring the whole courtroom to attention, in often essay to all known theories of jurisprudence. Judge Harold Brybar was a celebrity judge, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. As Brybar sat down, He produced his legendary gavel from the folds of his cloak. It was the gavel that had sent General Sabrina Gallo to the slammer. It was the gavel that had brought justice to the ungrateful eight. It was the gavel that had so mournfully let the scarlet assassin walk on a series of technicalities. Years ago, a rookie reporter dubbed it the cinematic hammer of justice, and the moniker stuck, though Brybar only laughed and shook his head ruefully when asked about the moniker. Chekhov would have surely side-eyed this fabled instrument of law and order. "This should be the final day of the trial," Judge Brybar said after customarily clearing his throat. "If Miss Tottle's statement runs long, we'll cut for lunch at 11. How long do you think you'll go?" He flashed a smile at the defendant. "An hour should do it." Marissa Tottle flashed a smile right back between lips, stained dark red. She came to court in a maroon pantsuit, with a long, matching jacket that almost reached the ground, and dark lipstick and finger nail polish to match. Stylish, but for her understated. Earlier in the trial she'd favored brighter colors, including a pastel blue skirt that drew immense attention, much of it mockery. In the press, she'd been on trial for previous burglaries and had proven as much a celebrity as the judge overseeing her case, that she'd taken to defending herself, only hiding the circus atmosphere. You couldn't wish for a more theatrical combination of defendant and judge. "Excellent," the judge said. "That would mean the jury can deliberate over lunch. A smooth running ship at last." The assembled audience, standing room only, laughed nervously, revealing how much tension the courtroom held. In theory, Tottle should be guilty as a Labrador by a demolished birthday cake. She'd been caught red-handed in the most elaborate and movie-like theft in the history of the planet, after all. But many speculated Tottle had a trick or two up her sleeve. Gambling websites gave a 15% chance of acquittal and even a 5% chance of escape. The third prime participant in this drama feels ordinary by comparison. Veronica brief-charted a conventional path as he rose through the prosecutorial ranks. Top grades, hard work, schmoozing, ambition, and a photographic memory. There's little reason to elaborate on her story. Veronica had aimed for calm, efficient, and professional as her persona. She let Marissa and Judge Brybar provide the entertainment. The stately prosecutor drew little mention in the tabloids despite overseeing the case of the millennium, and she presented a good case, which was easy in one sense because of how strong the evidence was. Someone had stolen the twin pins of Mars' diamond-encrusted spikes that ceremonially finished the oxygen dome of the first Martian city. Marissa Tottle was a known high-stakes burglar and ex-con. She'd been present at the benefit concert from which the pens were stolen, and she'd purchased the chemicals needed for the distracting foam bomb that had gone off at the concert, and most damningly, one of the diamond pens had been found in her very apartment. The Lee saint of witnesses and items and evidence is so long that, again, there's little need to go into much detail. The most troubling possibility was that if the jury liked Marissa too much, that they were simply so entertained they might ignore the evidence and vote for acquittal the day the defendant would make her last appeal. Today, Marissa Tottle, who'd fired her lawyers after just 4 days into the proceedings, would make her closing argument. She wasn't a lawyer, had never been to law school, Anne committed innumerable mistakes of law throughout the trial, but she still possessed his supernatural confidence of a legendary burglar. So she plowed ahead, learned from each mistake of process, always found a way to laugh with the audience as she suffered a series of sustained objections against her. The Red Planet stood entranced, listening to how she would make her final plea. Marissa Tottle rose. She was quite short, but cut a dramatic figure nonetheless. She strode to the center of the room to address the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my honored peers, good morning to you. Also, good morning to everyone watching in the live audience in this wonderful city of New Olympus and all across Mars and our sister planet of Earth. Also, a quick shout out to anyone reading the transcript in the future. That's serious dedication. Laughter. The prosecution has done a thorough job presenting the evidence against me, and I would be foolish to claim no fear. They've found one of the diamond pens at my apartment. Can you believe my incredulity? Without that one piece of evidence, all they have is hearsay and circumstance. And who hasn't been hurt by hearsay and circumstance? I was sorely mistreated on the day they earned my home. Veronica had decided early in the trial not to be surprised by anything Marissa said. Here she was, starting her final defense by bringing up the single strongest piece of evidence against her, submerging it in a strange cocktail of jokes and grievances. Still, she was as oddly compelling as she'd been the whole trial. Have I mentioned how good you looked? Jury, the fall weather has really brought out your fashion sense. Such lovely browns and greens. I'm going to miss you all when this trial is finally over. And soon it will be over, won't it? Oh, I don't know if this is legal. Is it legal to compliment and reminisce with the jury? It is if there's no objection from the prosecution. This was the judge, now looking in Veronica's direction with a raised eyebrow all around the court. Veronica felt all eyes suddenly on her, and it was true. She could object for relevance or ingratiation, which Mars had added to the legal code 50 years ago. No objection, Veronica said after a pause worthy of a sitcom, to titters and laughter from the audience. She hadn't intended to object at all. No matter how wild the defend had got, it's considered poor form to object during closing arguments, unless the faults are egregious. Plus, ordinary folks see through flattery and immaterial wanderings most of the time, and that should be especially so in this case. Marissa wasn't just on trial for grand theft, but also for assault. When she'd set off the foam bomb at the dedication ceremony, 3 people had been injured, and many dozens more might have been. These charges alone could add up to decades behind bars. A jury might excuse burglary if they liked a defendant, but harming innocent spectators, no way. Veronica, though, Marissa had avoided lengthy prison sentences from previous burglaries through clever negotiating and because she'd always been careful to avoid violence. Now, she might be mere hours from a lifetime in prison. How was she so calm? At this point, Marissa had moved on to a PowerPoint presentation with a selection of quotes projected onto the large screen across from the jury, with certain words highlighted for effect. The Rodden which made all the plans and said it would be an easy score without any risk of harm to anyone. That's what one of my supposed henchmen said about me. if you'll remember. I don't see why that insult was necessary. Read the next quote, this time from a witness who supposedly saw me outside the concert hall. She was laughing like a hyena or like some evil witch. With the shouting inside, I could barely hear her, but I was close enough I could just make out the cackle. I could read each and every one of these quotes, each more demeaning than the last. But you can look over the full list if you've got the stomach for it. So many horrible things said about me, which I don't mind. I can accept taunts and jeers. But it is certainly interesting that so many of these witnesses couldn't help but include spiteful, disparaging remarks. And you'll notice how many bring out the W word. It almost feels like they were coordinating their testimony. Somehow, Veronica caught a glimpse of the jury. She read ambivalence on their faces, scowls, smirks narrowed, focused eyes, and furrowed brows. They were all paying attention, but none appeared sympathetic, and only a few seemed amused. She found it galling that Marissa would imply misconduct from the prosecution early in the legal process. Marissa had tried to trade the location of the second diamond pen for legal protection, which Veronica could never have agreed to, not leastwise because the police were convinced they could lean on her conspirators to produce the second pen, an assumption which, 7 weeks later, had not come true. Those negotiations were inadmissible at trial, but made Marissa's attempts to cast the prosecution as corrupt all the more preposterous. Marissa knew she was guilty, and knew the prosecution knew she was guilty. And then there's the matter of the diamond pin of peace, found in my apartment, right under my very bed. It's the linchpin of the case against me. But do you find that likely that a supposed master criminal would conceal the single most damning evidence in the most obvious and cliched place to hide something? And that underscores my next point, that the diamond pin of prosperity is yet to be found. If I had stolen them both, why, hide one in an obvious place, then another where the police have yet still to find. I'm not going to accuse anyone else of being the real thief, and therefore the person who planted the evidence. Why, like keeping half the spoils for themselves. Not right at this moment anyway. I don't have the resources of the police or prosecutors to chase leads and likely suspects. But how can you not be suspicious? These circumstances, Marissa had raised her voice by this point, despite her grandiosity. She'd kept her tone civil, even playful, but now she strode about the floor, her jacket swirling in glee. At red arcs, she turned to the prosecution table and approached Veronica, though even with her heels, she stood barely a few inches taller than her adversary. Sitting up straight, Marissa leaned over the table between them. Veronica held her gaze in as steely a manner she could muster. She wasn't intimidated, but feared smiling at this bit of theatrics, which might send the wrong message to the jury. They've stacked things so thoroughly against me. A huge team of cops and prosecutors all working to dig up evidence. 3 of my friends called to testify against me, hundreds of hours of security video, reams of texts stolen from my phone. All this effort searching for any slip-up, inconsistency, or wrong place, wrong time circumstance. And in the end their whole case rests on a single dubious discovery. Marissa whirled on Veronica, her jacket cape swirling like a tornado. She approached the judge, held his eye contact for many moments. Veronica couldn't read her face. With her back turned, but Judge Brybar's eyes narrowed, turning from amused to suspicious to worried. Only then did worrying enter Veronica's own mind. Could Marissa really have a grand plan to turn the trial on its head or even to escape? Everyone in this courtroom stands against me. I've been fighting every official and advocate to line for a single purpose. These whole 7 weeks I've fought. She stood right before the judge, now a dark red fingernail pointed but a meter from his face. Control yourself, the judge warned, his voice steady. Marissa slowly retreated her hand to her chest, but kept the finger out. Then she approached still further and placed her hands on the edge of the bench. Judge Brybar screwed his face up in an apoplectic grimace. I kindly ask you to back away, the judge said with barely concealed rage, and Marissa did so. She turned slowly, her jacket an eddy rather than a hurricane. The whole audience appeared to exhale at this drawdown in tension. The calm wouldn't last. The true thief, the true mastermind, is in this courtroom right now. Marissa raised her hand, extending that damning index finger clad in crimson, thrusting it high in the air like the barrel of a smoking gun. The courtroom turned deathly quiet. Marissa twirled her finger in the air. Once, twice, a woman screamed in the audience. Several people stood. Veronica noticed the judge fumbling for his gavel. Why was his gavel not to hand? Veronica's photographic memory went to work, rewinding to a minute prior. The gavel had disappeared. From the moment Marissa had placed her hands on the bench, when she'd made that dramatic turn she must have. Approach, Your Honor, Veronica called out, but was drowned out by the growing tumult of the audience. She stood and shouted, Approach, Your Honor, your gavel. She has your gavel in her sleeve. The chaos intensified. Cries and laughter mixing together. Judge Brybar's eyes were wide as Phobos and Deimos in the Martian night sky. The bailiffs stood frozen for a moment, but one caught Veronica's eye. They nodded at each other and sprung into motion. Veronica charged. She couldn't say why necessarily, but the thought entered her mind that perhaps this was a grand distraction to allow Marissa some clever escape, and that was just too much of an affront to the seasoned prosecutor. It was a breach of decorum to get involved in bailiff duties. But Veronica had been a track athlete in college and had taken basic police training, and there was so much energy in the courtroom. The bailiff was a stocky woman with a tight ponytail whose expression almost never changed. Her name was Lawrence. Veronica wanted to say got there first and held Marissa under the ARMS. Marissa was making a show of struggling without really struggling, calling her capture a brute. Veronica held Marissa's eye contact while she riffled in her sleeves, reducing the lost gavel within seconds. I believe this belongs to you, she said with what she hoped was cinematic showmanship as she cast the gavel onto the bench. Adjourned. Take the defendant into custody. The judge had retrieved the cinematic hammer of justice and was banging it on the bench like a woodpecker. Slowly the veins in his forehead receded as the bailiffs took Marissa away. Next, the judge leaned down to whisper to Veronica, Meet me in chambers. I fear we're looking at a mistrial. Of course, a mistrial. Was that Marissa's plan? But how would this help her? More chances to escape? Maybe. But then she'd surely earned tighter security from this fiasco. She'd wait in prison for the next trial. and the evidence against her would be as strong as ever. Why had she done this? Why had she made such a scene? But then she'd so loved playing the lawyer, stirring up drama, and having all eyes on her. These last 7 weeks may have been the most exciting of an already legendary life. With this performance, Morris at Tottle hadn't earned her freedom, but she'd earned another shot at being the center of the known universe. Story 5. Under the Mediterranean Sun. Please regard this as my full confession. I do not wish to die with a heavy heart. I wish you were able to see him just now. He is preparing to land the final blow, W, and I know I will be dead within seconds, yet, even when he harbors murder in his eyes, I have never seen a more attractive, more enticing, more beautiful human than him. Please do not take offense to this. I am sure you are quite tantalizing yourself. I probably would have stalked and hurt you too, as many times as I did him. If we had had the pleasure to meet before my death, I am not sure who I am talking to. You are probably a figment of my imagination, so I will let you choose your identity. A noble priest, a nefarious judge, my best friend, D. We grow up together, hiding our lanky limbs under a desk, our buzzing giggles shadowed by one of those huge Herman Miller office chairs after we had terrorized our neighbors. Or were you the one to finally catch me, scold me for ever having existed as if I had chosen to do so before you too? Like my darling Arthur, in memory of all my victims, would strike me dead, overwhelmed by the merry feeling that you are ridding the world of a past. Here is my advice. Please refrain from choosing your identity until I finish my confession. I do not wish for judgment or sympathy. I do not wish for looks of disdain or understanding. I was born into a family of stalkers, torturers, the worst of the worst, as we had been called, who took enjoyment from stabbing, piercing ulcers, instead of a caress, a hug, a loving kiss. But I do not wish to die the way my family made me. I was already granted half a wish, dying in Arthur's arms, so grant me the oath, a half. Grant me the relief of shedding all labels others have chosen for me my entire life, until I take my last breath, and then you can choose to mock, to sympathize, or to shrug, and then never think of me again. The problem is, though, you will think of me again, no matter who you are, no matter how fortified your home is. My family is everywhere, and if you are real, then they lines find you, stalk you, hurt you, and treat you like I treated my Arthur. I promise you this, I guarantee it. Unless you live in Iceland, screw that place. Not even you are worth that much icy discomfort. It was June when I started stalking my first victims. Why? Because I had dared to fall in love, and Mother wouldn't let me date without first drawing blood. If you are old enough to mate, you are old enough to make use of that weapon you inherited from us. I always hated the way she spoke to me. She called it mating. I called it the ultimate form of bonding with another. I suppose you can call me a romantic, but she was right. In my family, drawing blood was a rite of passage, a predecessor to making love. Some would agree that it was a necessity, or perhaps superstition. Aunt Bianca tussled with your uncle before she found her first victim, and she never had any offspring. She never became strong enough. Her eggs were spoiled. I hated talking of how our reproductive system with Mother, another one of her horrid terms, offspring. Who calls them that? I call them babies, like you should, like Arthur did at that time. I was so adamant about the ultimate form of bonding with my boyfriend, Ambrose, Boz for short, that I agreed to mother's terms and flew to Chalkidiki to begin my reign of terror. I confess to being a little superstitious myself, aside from being a romantic, so I didn't want to risk the existence of my future babies for morals and the ethical treatment of people. I chose Chalkidiki, a town of Neos Marmaras, to be precise. For sentimental reasons, it was where Buzz and I first met. Let me tell you a little about that day. His father and he had flown there on holiday. But Mother and I were there for her business purposes, while Buzz and his dad were sipping on freshly squeezed OJ by the sea. Mother was scanning the beach for her next strike. We move rough the crowded beach with ease. The shore was doused in scents of nutty ladolia, olives that bobbed in tourists' plastic cups filled with cheap, dirty martinis. I noted wafts of other alcoholic beverages sold by sweaty locals in the shade of their shoreline kiosks, pine-flavored Retsina wine, tart brandy some fools paid too much for, sunny-colored cocktails of many names, but that all smelled of sea air, trust, and the promise of assistance in leaving your worries behind. I preferred the smell of those amber-colored local sweat to all these abominations I just listed. You would blame it on my wrathful nature, but Mother felt the same. She eyed an attractive sunscreen-laden senior, his exposed shaggy belly drooping over his swim trunks, but ultimately declined his inviting stance. She moved her focus to a redhead whose skin was riddled with freckles like patches of mold on basement walls. She was incredibly attractive herself. Mother declined this temptation as well. Why not her? Mother, she is so luring, I finally inquired, trying to make use of one of the new descriptive terms I learned that day from her when referring to victims I wouldn't understand how many perfectly suitable fools she denied luring, she corrected, nudging me uncomfortably close to a distracted group of gentlewomen with skin as smooth as queered wood. Their pits smelled of apricots that had been left too long in the sun. I loved it. You have to favor diversity, my darling. Detect, discern, juxtapose. You do not choose a victim before comparing sugar cubes to salted gherkins, feta to buttery brie, honey roasted carrots to Kansas barbecue dipped chicken bites. She was talking, of course, of the way those tourists smell when I'll pierce their skin with the weapon she had inherited from her mother. Their blood usually smelled of their Last Supper, or so she claimed. She was searching for indications of a scent she hadn't tried before. So we kept moving quietly through the oblivious fools. My family has always been obsessed with scents. Mother makes me sniff armpits, I confessed to Buzz later that evening, when we met and shared a peach nectar on a desolate folding chair by the salted waves. We were sharing 10 interesting facts about our families as part of our courting ritual. While I was enjoying Buzz's company, Mother had broken into one of the apricot-scented gentlewoman's Airbnb and was hacking into her arms as we spoke. I was, understandably, drenched in candid nostalgia when I landed in Neos Marmaras, thinking fondly of Mother and all the lessons she had taught me during that last trip. I rested on a folding chair that was about to be ambushed by the high tide, just to keep Buzz's memory fresh in my mind. He was my purpose for being there, why I scanned skins, and pits and hairy toes, and temples sullied by sweat. I resisted the urge to choose the first peach-ass, scented idiot as my first victim, recalling Buzz's lean arms as he helped me sip on that nectar juice we had shared. I truly am a romantic, and focused on mother's education. Detect, discern, juxtapose. Oh, I sure did detect, I sure did discern, I sure did juxtapose. By the end of that first day, I had followed 5 morons back to their air-conditioned suites, to their whitewashed camper trailers, to their intimate gyros dates in greasy diners, to their pain and anguish and ahs and get-away from me's. And here is my first confession, my patient priest, my judge, my best friend. I enjoyed it. Under that Mediterranean sun, I saw skins sizzle and blister and turn to shades of chestnut and cinnamon. I saw them seek comfort in the silky sands of Porto Caras after a quick splash in the Aegean Sea. I saw their bellies bloat with pasticcio, avgolemono soup, and lokma. As I watched them do so, I turned to shadows, I turned to the pitch black that engulfed the salted town after dusk, to stealth and patience and obscurity. I waited for them in the darkest corners of their perfumed bathrooms, where they'd enter after midnight homes of ultimate bonding with their partners, where they'd find me, feel me struggling to deflect my attack, yelping after their failure to do so. I waited for them endlessly in Muno, its seaports, watching ferries bobbing closer to the shores. To me, to the pleasure I took in hurting them when no one looked. I gave in to the darkest corners of my mind, my nature, my Illy's culture, and I savored every moment I spent on every beach, dotted with confetti-colored umbrellas in Neos Marmaras. I knew for certain that my eggs would not be spoiled like Aunt Bianca's. I would soon return home to Baz. We would be blessed with hundreds, millions, billions of babies, and we'd spend our days teaching our girls to detect, discern, and juxtapose until they'd bless us with grandbabies, and mother would be proud. I would never figure out how life would have played out with Buzz by my side, because by the end of July I wanted more from Arthur, with Arthur, and only him. Our affair started much like it did with Buzz. We shared a folding chair peppered with crumbs of sesame pretzels, watching Mount Idemo stretch hollow in the peninsula like a sleepy giant. In the mornings he smelled of damsel fish and loggerhead turtles. He'd often go snorkeling in the shallow waters of the Toronio's Gulf or Ka, yaking with friends in the tiny fishing village of Vorvuru. Always early in the day, I told him I had always feared water, and would wait for him on any folding chair or beach towel. I no longer craved peach-flavored nectars. In the afternoons he smelled of salt and milky bed sheets. He'd refuse to shower right after his sea adventures, and we'd both dash straight to bed and nap in the drafty bedroom of his rented bungalow. In the evenings his skin was freshly browned by the latest sunset and smelled like it. I'd cling to that sun-kissed skin everywhere we'd go, his arm hair tickling my lean limbs. I would laugh at his friends' jokes and sneak a sip out of his pineapple smoothies and momentarily forget all about mother, about family, ponds, about apricot-scented pits, and the importance of drawing blood before dates. I wanted more of those mornings, those afternoons, those evenings, when his skin smelled of fish and adventure and linen, sheets and all that was good in the world. I wanted more, more, and he gave me all of it, ... This is my second confession. My kind priest, judge, share, isht best friend, in early August, when he locked me out of his bungalow, I immediately thought of making use of mother's weapon on Arthur ... I couldn't help it. I guess it's in my nature. Forg me, I don't intend to use this as an excuse, but how else would you explain my sudden shift in intention, the shadows that made their way back to me in an instant, the pitch black, the stealth and patience and obscurity? He was so disgustingly crass about his indifference, too. He made no attempt to hide Sophia from me. I never got close enough to her to figure out her smell. But I imagined putrid, raw tomatoes that had been forgotten on vines for hundreds of years. They would kiss on our folding chairs and beach towels. They would share pineapple smoothies and jokes, and his friends liked her better than me. I could tell they talked to her, not around her, like they used to do with me. I watched it all from the shadows I discovered around the peninsula back in June. I started breaking into his rented accommodation, creating hiding places out of disregarded shadows in the corner, the back of a couch, an empty shower cabin, because I wanted more, more, and Arthur was providing less. My anger muddied my caution, though, and I grew careless about my stealth. He'd find me and yell obscenities. Get out, get away from me, you disgusting piece of sh. He'd eventually trail off, chasing me out of his bedroom, and he'd be free of me for that night. But I always went back to him. My last and final confession, my dear someone, is this: I stalked and tortured and dissected Arthur's sunset-scented skin inch by inch for 28 days, and enjoyed it. I dodged his strikes, his obscenities, his hatred for 28 blissful days. When my two worlds collided, the love I felt for darling Arthur and mother's merciless education of our family's ways, no torture was fatal, no cut too deep, just so he knew that I would be back the next day, relentless, angry, vengeful. No corner was lit well enough to expose my heartbroken presence, no room quiet enough to reveal my buzzing enthusiasm. I now only lived for the more of it all. I no longer lived for imagined futures with Buzz, our hundreds, millions, billions of babies surrounding us on the beaches of Neos Marmaras as we shared a folding chair by the sea. If Arthur was giving me less, I was taking more blood. But you tire of it, you know, and mother never taught me what to do in case I grew tired of it. I rode the crescendo of my tortures all the way to Arthur's limit. When I broke into his rented bungalow this morning, I mentioned to you that I saw him harbor murder in his eyes. For that reason, I thought, for just a second, that he'd grown to fit so well with my family that I could teach him all about sniffing armpits and detecting, discerning, juxtaposing. Before he would strike his victims, I touched his skin and recognized the scents of damselfish and loggerhead turtles. If I could have, I would Ave wept in that moment and allowed his arm hair to tickle me one last time. Maybe, just maybe, he would forgive me, understand me, and we would have more More days of salted villa, chaise, and pineapple-flavored adventures under the warm Mediterranean sun. ... I closed my eyes and let out a humming sigh of wistful relief. For you have kept your promise, my noble priest, my nefarious judge, my best friend, and did not label me until this very moment. I felt Arthur's hand descend upon me, and I knew no more would come. ... Did you get it? Sophia called from the kitchen, slicing ripe Roma tomatoes for their breakfast. Yeah, Arthur confirmed excitedly, lifting his hand to find a dead mosquito crushed between his arm hairs. Thank God, it feels like this stupid thing's been following me around for months. Story 6, The Sacrament, Northern Sink. 22 levels below ground, a bark of gunfire echoed through the corridors of the decrepit factory, then another, then silence. As Rena stood waiting patiently in the doorway, she could hear yelling, pleading, and groans of pain. Eventually, many emerged, limping from the smoke, hands raised in surrender. Her own crew in black storm cloaks followed behind them, weapons ready to discourage any last-minute heroics. The raid was a success. Kai, her second cousin and trusted rig, HT hand man, rounded the corner. We got him, we got 'em all. Rena holstered her weapon, which immediately relieved all the tension from her shoulders. Rain's letting up, she noted, glancing out the window. Of course, by rain, she meant rainwash. No one born in the sink had ever seen real rain before. Here, hundreds of meters below ground level, far beneath the towering mega-stacks that formed the sky level, they simply got whatever sloshed down from level to level, street to street. Now that the gunfire had ebbed, all that was left was the pattering of rainwash on polycrete. I'll take that as a good omen, Kai said, before patting her on the shoulder. Come on, let's get what we came for. Kai led her through more corridors, where men lay bleeding and bullet casings littered the floor. Many of the rooms they passed were filled with drugs, weapons, and other contraband, ready for moving obscenity. They kept going until arriving at an open factory floor. A man knelt there, battered and blooded, held at gunpoint by two of her own. Every inch of his gaunt, pale skin was scrawled with swirling tattoos. Everything aside from his black cybernetic arm, Rena crouched before him. Iron Hand, you old bastard. Rena the Reaver, he coughed. You should have called ahead. I would have popped open my finest black brew. She gazed down at him, unperturbed. 2 years ago, my father found something he wasn't supposed to. And for that, you and your crew got him in the street like a common muckrat. Is there a question, or are we just waxing poetical? He sneered. Get on with it. Have your justice. Oh, you'll pay, don't you worry. But first, one question. She gave a frosty smile. Where is the sacrament? His eyes widened, all bravado evaporating in an instant. Rena drew herself close enough to smell his utopia-rancid breath. Yes, we know what it's called. We know it's here, and we're not leaving without it. The man flinched, lips pursed. You will tell me what my father died for. And if you don't, we'll carve it from you. Rena nodded to her cousin. Kai brandished a curved knife large enough to make a butcher blush. The sacrament's not a thing, you drecking moron, Iron Hand hissed through gritted teeth. It's a place. Hayes. Rena drew her pistol and pressed its nozzle so far up his chin, the quivering man could probably taste the steel on his tongue. Show me. The old gang boss reluctantly led her and Kai through a labyrinth of corridors plastered with graffiti. They passed rooms filled with weapons, drugs, and other illicit merchandise, packed and ready for moving. Finally, they halted at a door. It looked no different than the others, so dull and gray it was barely visible against the wall. He stood there, frozen in one last act of defiance. Rena leaned over to her cousin. For every further delay, take off a finger, the threat was enough to thaw the old man into movement. He reluctantly brandished a key and unlocked the door. Together they all stepped through and were met with another unremarkable gray room, but unlike the others, this one was noticeably clean, completely devoid of graffiti, trash, or even the scent of utopium. Rainwash streamed through a large cavity in the ceiling, trickling down onto an unruly patch of grass that was growing in the center of the room. Surrounding the patch were a few rugs, some pillows, and a worn couch. "This is it," Iron Hand said. "The sacrament." "What the hell is this?" Rena snapped. The man shook his head and pointed at the hole in the ceiling. "See for yourself." Rena rolled her eyes and walked up to it. The rainwash had slowed to a trickle. "Careful, her cousin whispered. Rena inched close enough to see all the way through the hole. The cavity went far, far deeper than she'd expected, and distance beyond the darkness and shadows and crisscrossing polycrete beams was a glowing square, no larger than her thumb. In that square was a twinkling of light, beaking through pillowy heat, haze, smoke, clouds. Iron Hand reply. Rena gasped, stumbling back. "Like I said, the sacrament is a place," the man said, his timbre deep with reverence. "The only place in the entire sink where you can still see the sky." "The sky?" Rena's hands trembled as her heart began to race. She glanced at Kai, who now stood transfixed. She looked back up, almost afraid that the hole would magically disappear. Soon enough the cotton shapes passed, and the light shone through with even greater radiance. Light like she'd never seen. She squinted, but refused to look away. As her eyes began to adjust, she noticed a hint of blue. Not like the electric blue seen on the real ski holoprojections, but a subdued blue, a serene blue, and it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Most people born in the sink had never seen the sky before. Yet, against all odds, despite hundreds of levels of overlapping streets, skyways, and megastacks jostling for position, the heavens had found a way to touch the darkest depths of the earth. Rena reached out, seeing that single shaft of warm dance across her hand. As warmth filled her face, Rena was startled to realize that she was crying. They all were. And in that moment, nothing mattered. Not the fighting, not the scheming, not even vengeance, just peace. Beneath a sunlit sky. Story 7. Always end in rain. Why does it always end in the rain? The words slipped out of her before she even knew she was thinking them. Each city around her blurred into streaks of silvers and neons. The rain fell like a curtain, closing over the final act, but there was no applause, just the sound of water as it pattered off her coat, so ached through her gloves, slipped down the back of her neck. It never bothered her. She'd done all her work in weather like this. Rain blurred vision, rain blurred guilt, rain washed away blow. Odd, rain made it easier to not see her own reflection. She stood beneath the sagging awning of an abandoned tram station, boots sunken into glossy black puddles, formed where rain washed the oil from the streets. Thunder crashed through the silence like a warning. She ignored it, just like she ignored most things that tried to warn her. That was the job, that was what she had to do. In the name of real hope, they told her, in the service of a better world. She believed them. God she used to believe them. Hope is such a beautiful lie. Her targets always used it like a web. On preachers, politicians, philanthropists, all the kind who promised salvation to the masses. As long as they simply obeyed, hope had the power to save lives. But in their hands hope was a cage, and she cut those wide open. She exhaled, breath misting in the cold, wet air. She didn't need to check the communicator on her wrist to know someone was watching, waiting for her to be done wallowing. They hated when she got philosophical, as they called it, but she was allowed this moment, this one sliver of introspection under the weeping sky. Becca used she had just completed her third mission in as many nights. 3 figures who used hope as a cudgel, 3 cages broken open. She expected a few more moments of silence. Instead, the communicator blinked. Uplink, new mission, priority level. Final, her jaw tightened. Final, she tapped to open the file. A single name, a single location, the dry crescent, a region that hadn't seen rainfall in 12 years, a place where water was tyrannical, rain dripped off her lash. Funny, she thought, how they always called people tyrants right before she put them in the ground. Tess. He crossed dunes, sands cascading down ancient wind-swept mounds. She passed rusted pipes that once carried water to thriving cities. She stepped over carcasses of machines that had meant to save them. Everything was dust, everything was sun-bleached, everything was starved. Her world taught her one thing about starvation. Not everything that starves is cruel, but everything that starves learns. Cruelty, the stronghold stood alone on the horizon. Like a confession, she infiltrated it the way she always did. Quiet, clean, efficient. But the deeper she traveled into its chambers, the more the mission soured in her gut. There were no slaves, no soldiers, no gaudy throne built from the labor of thousands, no stolen luxury, just machinery, tanks, pipes, a system designed to store Unimag, enable quantities of water. She expected excess. She found preservation, and then she found him. A thin man with tired eyes and sand-cracked skin, bent over a filtration unit, humming softly in the dim light. No guards? She asked. Stepping from the shadows, he didn't flinch. He just offered an exhausted smile. If someone is coming to kill me, guards one. Stop them, then you know who I am. I've known for weeks. She raised her gun. He looked at her. His eyes held something soft, almost like pity. Not the fear or guilt or desperation he had come to know from these types. Tell me why, she said. He gestured to the massive tank behind him, clear walls, full to the brim with shimmering blue. Because the rains never stopped, not a lie, they just moved. What, this region's drought? It's artificial. The companies you work for redirected atmospheric condensers to keep the capital green. They left us to starve. I've been storing and distributing water in secret. If they knew, well, I suppose they do know. He gazes fixes upon her. This broke something within her, something inside her. Something she always thought was written in stone, cracked clean through. She lowered the gun. "There's got to be another way," she whispered. He smiled again, soft and resigned. "I wish that were true." The alarms began screaming. Red light filling the chambers. Her employers had arrived. They never intended for her to investigate. They intended for her to confirm the kill. He pushed her aside as the blast tore through the chamber. Water tanks ruptured. Glass exploded out like razor shrapnel. She scrambled to him, dragging his bleeding body out from under a collapsed pipe. His breaths were shallow, eyes glossing over. Water from the broken tanks streamed down his forehead, but he didn't seem to feel it. "I just wanted them to have this," he whispered, "a future with water." His eyes slipped shut before she could answer. Her throat closed. She tried to stop the bleeding. She couldn't. His body went still. She stayed there, kneeling in the growing red pool of stolen water, surrounded by the ruin as of his life's work. Above them the sky was cloudless and blue, clearly visible through the hole in the ceiling. Even under this clear sky, water began to rain down over her. The first drop hit her cheek, then another, then 1,000 more. Rain poured over his lifeless body, over the broken tanks, over her shaking hands. No, not rain, just water from the broken tanks, water he saint, all to save millions, now lost to the desert, who drank it greedily. Why does it always end in the rain?